What if I told you that some of Bollywood's biggest thrillers, action films, and emotional dramas actually started with Korean movies? Indian cinema has been borrowing stories from South Korea for decades. But here's the big question. When these movies came to India, did they stay faithful to the original stories? Or did Bollywood completely change them to suit Indian tastes? And of course, the biggest question, did they work? Let's start with the most controversial one, since it was technically an unauthorized adaptation. If you watch Korean cinema, you have probably heard of Oldboy. Fun fact, we were especially told to break down that iconic corridor sequence in film school. But moving on. The story follows a man who is mysteriously imprisoned for 15 years without knowing why. One day, he is suddenly released and given 5 days to discover who imprisoned him and the reason behind it. Now enters Zinda. The Bollywood version stars Sanjay Dutt and follows almost the exact same premise. In fact, many critics argued it followed the Korean film too closely, replicating it frame by frame. The biggest change, though, the infamous psychological incest twist in Oldboy was softened because the original ending would have been extremely controversial among mainstream Indian audiences. However, if there's one adaptation many fans agree was pretty good, is Rocky Handsome. The original Korean film The Man from Nowhere follows a lonely former special agent who forms a bond with a young girl living next door. When she's kidnapped by a criminal organization, he goes on a brutal mission to rescue her. The Indian adaptation stars John Abraham. The core story remains almost identical. A quiet man with a tragic past develops a protective relationship with a little girl and unleashes his deadly skills when she's taken away. The main changes were the protagonist's look, wherein the Korean original features an unassuming, almost frail looking hero who contrasts sharply with his lethal skills, whereas the Indian version features a muscular action star who focuses more heavily on brute force and physical dominance. Then Rocky Handsome had more upgraded and brutal action scenes and of course the typical Bollywood elements including musical numbers, backstories and romances that reveal the protagonist's trauma upfront. Next up on our list is Jazbaa. The Korean film 7 Days tells the story of a successful lawyer whose daughter is kidnapped. To get her child back, she is forced to defend a convicted criminal in court. Every decision she makes becomes a race against time. The Bollywood adaptation stars Aishwarya Rai Bachchan. The central plot remained largely unchanged because the original concept was already incredibly strong. However, Bollywood added several elements like more emotional family scenes, a stronger friendship subplot, and additional dramatic moments, and of course, songs in the background soundtrack. Essentially, the story became more emotional and character focused. Critics praised Aishwarya's performance, but reactions to the film itself were slightly mixed. Some felt the added melodrama reduced the tension that made the Korean version so gripping. Others appreciated that it felt more emotionally accessible for Indian viewers. Now, let's talk about one of Netflix India's biggest adaptations. The Korean film The Terror Live follows a now disgraced current affairs radio host who receives a threatening phone call from a terrorist. At first, he dismisses it, however, soon enough, a bridge explodes live on air. Suddenly, he finds himself at the center of a national crisis. The Indian adaptation Dhamaka stars Kartik Aaryan, and just like the previous Indian adaptations, the plotline was pretty similar and the emotional stakes were raised. The film received mixed reviews from critics. While praising Aryan's performance and Madhavani's direction, they pointed out the cliched plot, dialogues, and set design in general. Many viewers who hadn't seen the Korean original one loved the fast-paced and suspense. However, fans of The Terror Live felt the Korean version was tighter and more intense. Next is the Korean thriller Blind, which follows a visually impaired woman who becomes the key witness in a hit-and-run case. Her disability causes police and others to question whether her testimony can be trusted. The Indian remake starring Sonam Kapoor retained the core mystery almost exactly. The major changes were mostly cultural localization and character adjustments. Critics generally appreciated Sonam Kapoor's performance. However, audience reception was mixed because many viewers compared it directly to the Korean version. And that's the challenge with modern remakes because Korean films are now easily available worldwide. People can watch both versions and compare them instantly. But now, let's switch the genres completely. The Korean romance film Always tells the story of a former boxer who falls in love with a visually impaired woman. The Indian adaptation starring Randeep Hooda and Kajal Agarwal follows the original story quite closely. But because this is Bollywood, the romance becomes bigger, more dramatic, and more emotionally expressive, which led many to feel the subtle emotional beauty of the Korean original got lost in the adaptation. So, the big question, did Bollywood improve these Korean stories, or were the originals still better? That's the debate fans have been having for years. But what were your opinions? Let us know in the comments below. However, that will be all for today. Do like, share, and subscribe to the Namaste Hallyu YouTube channel, and we'll see you all next time. Annyeong.